Hey, I just wanted to see if I could help you guys a little bit on how to deal with the elements as you're making some kind of an analysis. So I brought up a painting here by a man by the name of Jacques-Louis David, 18th century painter, and I'm going to show you how I would talk about this painting, or tell you rather, how I would talk about this painting using the elements, which is what your instruction is about, I think, on this first assignment. Okay, so let me bring it up here. This is assignment 1, week 1, and it gives you, or week 1 rather, this is in the lecture notes, and it tells you essentially what the elements are. There's line, color, value, texture, shape, form, and space. Now, I know you know vaguely what these mean, but the problem is, what do these mean in design? Okay, so then what they do in this discussion, and this is just a little bit of a nice way to maybe review yourself, they tell you that color has these properties. Now basically, color has hue, value, and intensity. Temperature is another aspect of color, but if you cover these first three ones, I think you're going to be home free as far as what these are about. Hue talks about the actual color, like red, yellow, blue, and that's what it tells you. Value is the lightness or darkness. A very light value of red or a high value of red would be probably pink, all right? Intensity, bright. An intense pink would be a hot pink, just and so on with temperature. Okay, so go through these, but as we talk about them, you don't have to refresh your mind right now, but as we talk about them, I'm going to pull this up just so we'll have in mind. We're going to look at line, we're going to look at color, we're going to look at value, texture, shape, form, and space. Now, little FYI, shape and form are essentially the same things, except that shape happens on a 2D surface and form is three-dimensional. Okay, so don't be talking about a picture, a photograph, or a painting and talk about the form. It's not what we're talking about there. Form is the same as shape, only it would be applicable to something like Michelangelo's David, which is in fact a three-dimensional sculpture. Okay, so let me get this out of the way and get us back to our painting, which is right here, and talk a little bit about these, again, using these. I'm going to get this up in the way. Sorry, I was trying to think of a way I could maybe make this area small enough so that I could put them both in the screen at the same time. I don't think I can, but I'll put them side by side. So I'm going to talk about line here, and if you do a little bit of reading online, and when I say reading, I just can't suggest strongly enough that you go back and look at that PDF I gave you. It's got all the terms and examples in there, okay? Now, you're talking about line. There's several different kinds of line. First one is an actual line, like you see a line here and a line there and a line there, and that's just a point moving in space, all right? Lots of actual lines in here. But now a line has what we call properties. It can be thick, it can be thin, it can be very delicate. When would a delicate line be appropriate? Maybe, well, something that's very faint, that doesn't have a real strong presence, or maybe a line drawing of a child would be a very delicate. So you talk about the quality of a line when you talk about it being harsh or rather heavy or very light and very delicate. All right, that's quality of line. Then we talk about different kinds of line. We talk about gestural line or psychic lines. A gestural line is where, like, this is Death of Socrates. I hope I told you that. Here you have him pointing, and that gives you a psychic or a gestural line, makes you want to look this way. Well, now, strangely enough, there's nothing up here, is there? But in this particular thing, David is giving us a message. This is the death of Socrates. What was Socrates? Greek philosopher, right? He was learning, and of course there are legends of his death, how he drank hemlock and committed suicide because of not wanting to admit. He was such a threat to the political people because he spoke the truth and he was all about learning, right? So anyway, if you were talking about gestural lines, he's making this gestural line up here, which is where the light is coming from. Now for the ancient Greeks, the light was from the gods, all right? And from our Judaic Christian ethic, the light is likewise from a higher power, but it could also be from the sun. You know, it could be illumination in the sense of learning. So he's gesturing up to learning maybe, and he's reaching for the hemlock at the same time. So is he saying, with me goes, not only because politicians demand my death, but with me goes the whole concept of science and learning and understanding what education's about, all right? That may be the point. Anyway, psychic or gestural lines, some actual lines in that, and then look at the lines of the body, essentially. Now, there's an actual line of the form this way, there's a line of that form this way, and then look how that bit of the bed pulls you over here, his leg takes you to Socrates. You see, so you've got lots of gestural lines that are pushing and pulling you through the composition. That's another line. Then let's move quickly over to color. We have a real saturated red here, hue red, saturated, bright, okay? We have some lighter colors. Over here we have a less saturated yellow, don't we? We have some less saturated oranges, but maybe not so, maybe more saturated or more intense in that sense. What about the value? Well, this is kind of a medium value. Value is that lightness or darkness. This is a very light or high value, white of course, the whitest part here. And the way the light illuminates his figure gives us some ideas too, doesn't it, as to the meaning? But very light is what he's about, lots of those light values. Now, if I looked at the whole piece, if I looked at this piece not about color and the value that's in color, but if I looked at this piece as light and darks, I would say that this is a kind of low key, meaning that there are more darks, these medium and dark grays, than there are lights. So I would call that maybe a low key. That's usually a very dramatic, especially, it's a very serious, but especially dramatic when you have this great intense kind of contrast between the very whitest whites and the darkest blacks. Okay, so we would say it's very dramatic, and in fact it is, because of this high contrast, because of the value changes from very dark to very light. Okay, now texture, lots of visual texture. You have a sense of this fabric. Now this is a small image, so you can't see much. Maybe a visual sense of the texture of that brick wall, if we can see it in higher resolution. And then the other element that comes up is shape. Well, now the shapes, I would say, are all very naturalistic and realistic, in the sense that this arm really looks like an arm. If you could photograph an arm, that's what an arm would look like. This back looks like a back. These heads, so you see these bricks, etc., etc. I would call that very naturalistic shapes, the way shapes actually occur in nature. The shape of a man is this shape, all right? So naturalist shapes. I'm not going to talk about form because we're talking about a 2D shape, right? And then space, I would say that by David's sense of kind of indicating this one-point linear perspective, you see the lines kind of here, that's giving us a sense of one-point linear. That gives us a sense of space. He's also giving us a sense of space by letting things in the background become much smaller than things in the foreground, and by letting things that as this kind of line, by letting things overlap, that also gives us a sense of space. Okay, so basically what I'm doing is I'm hitting those elements of art that are presented to you in that first little section on what are the elements of art. It's in, I believe, week 1. It's in those yeah, it's over here. It's over in week 1's right here. And it's down here, elements of art. And if I can move my thing down a bit, oh, that's the wrong thing. I need to move this down, sorry. If I can move this down a little bit, then right here, elements of art, okay? Here's another one. I could go to here, and this would expand on what we've got here, and then I could go to principles, but that will be the thing we'll do for the second assignment, okay? So my point in doing this is not to confuse you, but to help you a little bit on what we mean when we say going through a composition, talking about what's actually there. Now, I would also be sure and tell you the title of this painting, which is the Death of Socrates, Jacques-Louis David. I would give you maybe dimensions, and certainly if this is, I believe this is in the Louvre. I may be mistaken on that one though, but they have lots of his work. But I would probably also give you where this particular thing is located. You can go into Webliography. In the web page on the class site, you see right up here, Webliography. That'll take you to a whole lot of different places where you can find some of these paintings if you're having trouble. And I think probably that's what I did, yeah. And I probably came down here and found it either here or at the Met, I'm not sure. Maybe somewhere else, but I think those are the the reasonable decisions? Well, anyway, my point was to hopefully give you some kind of an idea of how to begin or how to progress on this particular assignment. Wish you well, and I look forward to looking at some of your work.